Good morning. It is the 40th anniversary of this conference, UC Tech, started in 1982. Of course, it had a name change. It was UCCSC. Got to get that right. My name is Miguel Rodriguez. I have spent the last several months, since January at least, living, breathing, not sleeping, and having nightmares about this as committee chair, waiting and anticipating for this moment. So holy cats, it's so awesome to see this room so full and familiar faces as well as some new faces. And hopefully I'll get to know more of you as the next day and a half or so, 2 days go by. All right, so we've got a whole program for you. I'm going to speed this up, but I do have some housekeeping. Before I say anything else, I will say this. The UC San Diego community holds great respect for the land and original people of the area where our campus is located. This university was built on the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. Today, the Kumeyaay people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and cultural traditions as vital members of our community, and we acknowledge that tremendous contribution to our region. Thank you for your stewardship. We would also not be able to do this without the generous support and continued contributions of our sponsors. Inside your tote bags, you do have raffle tickets. There's a card with instructions on how to go about the raffle. The way it's gonna go, it's a full game. You're gonna have to go to the vendor room. You're gonna have to check out every vendor table. You're gonna have to get to know our sponsors and our partners, and you're gonna have to choose which of your limited number of tickets you're going to go for. We got over 30 prizes from our sponsors with values of at least $300 each. So we're really excited. We're really grateful for that. And the sponsors will be drawing tomorrow morning, and you'll be able to pick that up tomorrow at lunch. Any questions? Come talk to me. All right, so I would also like to call out specifically our gold level sponsors. Zoom, also helping power our hybrid conference, Google Cloud, E+, Diversified, Huntington Business Systems, Jamf, Pantheon, Perivita, Rubrik, Spirion, CDW, Lenovo, Crestron, Cisco, E+, Dasher Technologies, Hewlett-Packard, Dell, VMware, Fortinet, GST, Mandiant, Trellix, Splunk, and Zscaler. Thank you all so much. We're here because of you. Thank you. We have a platinum sponsor that we're going to call out. But before I do that, I'm going to invite our fearless leader onto the stage. Dr. Vince Kellen currently serves as the Chief Information Officer right here at the University of California, San Diego, as well as a member of the Chancellor's Cabinet and Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer's Senior Management Team. He is a big reason that all of you are here today enjoying our fair and fairly hot city. So let's give him a warm welcome. And he brought a friend. We have a friend to accompany him. Yeah, come on down.
Thank you, Miguel. So irrepressible as always. Want to welcome everybody here to San Diego, and I do want to mention we are going D1, so that's happening, and so a big shout out to UCLA for leaving the Pac open for us. The Big Ten doesn't care, and they do care about the revenue, but they're not worried about the competition, and neither is the SEC. I'm from SEC country as well, so we look at that with amusement more than anything, but I think it's an opportunity for us. And yes, we're going D1, and yes, that's our mascot. And in case you were wondering, that is Ariel's dad. So again, welcome. Thanks for being here. Every time I do this, I encourage everybody here, please get outside, enjoy the weather, take advantage of your time here in San Diego. There's only a 95% chance you're gonna have another day just like this. You know, I'm from Chicago and from Lexington, been here 6 years now. And when my wife and I moved down here, we thought, oh my gosh, we gotta take advantage of every sunny day. And after 4 months, we were exhausted. We're like, we're just gonna stay home. I mean, how many days of 75 and sunny in a row can a human take? Right. Now, we do get this thing called, May gray, right? But it does extend into no sky, into doom gloom, then no sky July, and then fogust. So it does happen. Now, if you go inland a little bit, it's a lot better. So you can kind of dial your climate here in San Diego. And coming from Chicago, I was back in Chicago earlier in March, and I was wearing a windbreaker, and I was telling all my Chicago friends, I said, you know what we call these things in San Diego? I said, what? I said, parkas. Now, on the other hand, the weather here in San Diego is really not what it's cracked up to be. I mean, I've got these horrible flip-flop tan lines on my feet. I've got to cover them up. And I'm grateful for the humid weather, because for those of you who work at home and are in flip-flops, you probably don't have cracked heels right now, right? San Diego has done real well with COVID. We don't know why. I have a theory. I think it's because we kind of naturally stand 6 feet away from each other, about the length of the surfboard. So it kind of hangs in there. So again, welcome here to San Diego, and certainly give a shout out to King Triton here as you walk about. There's some very interesting sculpture around campus, so I encourage you to walk around and take a look at that. Certainly enjoy the conference. It's good to see faces here after so much isolation and Zoom works. And again, thank you. And a big shout out again to our sponsors, and Amazon, our platinum sponsor. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vince. And now it is with no small amount of pleasure, I invite our next speaker to the stage. Jen Stringer is the Associate Vice Chancellor for IT and CIO at the University of California, Berkeley. Her experience in educational and academic technology services has included New York University and Stanford School of Medicine, and has worked in educational research since 1989. She is a leader, technologist, librarian who is passionate about the role of technology and access to information as a strategic enabler to support academic and public missions. She believes technology can and should be a force for good in the world. We do agree, and that's why you're here. Welcome. Thank you.
So I am actually here in our fearless leader, Van Loom's stead. He is home, unfortunately, with a small family health issue, but he is watching us. So if everybody can say hi to Van. Hi, Van. Yeah, we miss you. And so you luckily get me. I am Jen Stringer. I am the chair of the IT Leadership Council of the academic side. And so Van asked me to step in for him today to talk a little bit about UC Tech, the community that we are trying to build as an entire system. And so I hope that I do some of his thoughts justice. First of all, 40 years, crazy, right? 40 years. So how many of you actually attended a UCSSC conference? How many of you? And for those of you online, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. How many of you attended the UCSSC conference? Awesome. How many of you is this your first UC-wide event? How many of you, your first UC? Lots and lots of hands, lots of hands. Welcome. Welcome to the UC community. Welcome to the UC Tech community. How many of you, this is your first in-person event since COVID? Oh, thank you for being brave to come and get to know your colleagues. Do you know that there are over 9,000 people with IT titles across our entire system? 9,000. That is a huge wealth of knowledge and community and insight. One of the things that I noticed when I became CIO at our campus is sometimes, not always, but sometimes we do what I call navel gazing, which is when we have a problem to solve or we're doing something, we look here and say, how can we do that? Aren't we wonderful? Instead of looking out and saying, who solved this problem? Maybe even better than we are, or who solved it first, or who's exploring this, new cloud technology. And so I want you to look around, and I want you to understand that there's a wealth of knowledge in this room, online, and in those 9,000 people who have IT titles across the system. And we're trying with UC Tech to build that community and make it even stronger. How many of you are on the Slack, the UC-wide Slack channel? Oh, awesome. That's awesome. That is a great place to start a channel, to talk about whatever your area is. I really encourage you, if you aren't already on it, to get on it. I won't do the how many anymore. We also have a UC blog, and there's a blog booth. So we want you to sort of connect with us. The blog will be being used to actually highlight some of the award winners and the nominees later on throughout the year of the Sauder Awards and the UC Technology Awards that you'll find out more about later tonight. So I really encourage you to think about this as a brain trust and a community that you can count on to help you solve your problems and to help you serve the mission of not only your individual institution, but of the entire UC system. All right. Before I sort of give it up, I would like to ask everyone to do something that's a little interactive. You ready for this? So for those of you online, you're going to put this in the chat. But for those of you in the room, I want you to look around, and I'm going to give you a bit of time to find a person you don't know, and you're going to tell them what thing has sparked joy in you that's related to your work lately. So what is one thing that sparked joy in your work lately? And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to find that person. Social distance, totally okay. But find that person. What has sparked joy recently? Okay. Okay. All right. All right. All right, everybody. Okay. Thank you. Wow. 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 Now I feel like a kindergarten teacher. Okay, if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. All right, thank you. That was awesome. Once we get you started talking, you can't stop. That's great. Okay. I hope that really, for those of you who may not know, the Spark Joy is a shout out to Marie Kondo, right? What sparks joy in your life? And I actually love using this as just an icebreaker. So the next time that you are actually running a meeting. Maybe people don't know each other. You want to sort of do a little icebreaker. It's one of my favorite icebreakers. I encourage you to use it as you get to know people. It's a great way to find out what people are thinking about and what they're really proud of, and what I call feeds their soul. So that's awesome. Before I give up the stage, I would like my colleague, Joe Bangfort, to come up. We want to talk a little bit about the IT Leadership Committee. Some of you may wonder what the heck CIOs do all day long. And so, we actually get together.
I can tell you.
Okay, yeah.
We experience joy every moment of the day.
We do.
Did you see all the CIOs up front here when she asked the question? They're like, oh, crap, what am I going to, wow, let me think about that for a minute. I can't even spell joy. Hi, I'm Joe Bangford. I'm the CIO at UC San Francisco. It is great to see all of you. I had no idea you were all here. Ever since I got off the plane yesterday, they've had the CIOs like running between partner meetings and vendor meetings and, dinners and all this stuff. And then I found out you're all having a party last night and we weren't invited.
I know.
So it's great to see everyone. Thank you to everyone here in San Diego. What do you call people from San Diego? Is it San Diegans? Sandites?
I don't know. Titans. Joy suckers?
You know what we call them up in San Francisco? Republicans. Just having fun, please. Okay, so I have this exciting topic to talk about. It's the IT Leadership Council. So we call it the ITLC. And basically, that is a council that is made up of the CIOs in the UC system. So the CIOs from the 10 campuses, the CIOs from the 6 health systems, from Hastings, can't forget the lawyers, and A&R, Ag and Natural Resources, and from the national labs.
Yep.
Right. So those CIOs get together and commiserate. No, they actually do commiserate quite a lot. It is a therapy thing. If you think about it, it really works. So and when some of the CIOs don't show up, like Van today, we talk smack about him like the whole time. So he is going down big time for not being here today. Hi, Van. All right, and but outside of that, the ITLC is really about looking for opportunities to work together. Not necessarily all of us doing the same thing, although occasionally we find that. More often it's 2 or 3 or 4 campuses that have a need, that have a problem, that have the opportunity to work together and to leverage each other's skills. The other thing we do as a group is encourage collaboration. So I was just talking to one of my team members here from UCSF a moment ago, and they told me about, hey, we do REDCap, right? REDCap is a really important tool in the research community, and they just spontaneously pulled together a group of people across the research campuses to share what they understand about REDCap, what we're doing at UCSF, what they're doing in San Diego, and started to combine all of this work. That is the kind of sponsorship that the ITLC is there to provide, is to make that a safe and important thing to do. So that's what we do. Now, we have the CIOs here today. There's been a lot of change in the CIO ranks over the last couple of pandemic years. So, but we have great representation from the CIOs at the conference this year. So if you'd please stand up, we want to just introduce you right quick. Jen, do you want to introduce the campus?
I will. And believe it or not, I had to keep notes because they're all, it's so new. Anyway, Molly is a CIO at UCOP proper, if there's a, yes. Aisha Jackson, she's UC Santa Cruz, woohoo! And only been here 3 weeks. She is the newest member, crazy, right? Nick Dugan at UC Merced. Lucy Avestine, I never get that right, Lucy, your last name, from UCLA. All right. We have 2 Adams, but this is Adam Hamilton from Hastings.
Okay, and I will introduce the two CIOs from the health system that are attending. First, we have Ellen Pollack from UCLA. Ellen is also fairly new, been in the job, what, about a year, something like that? Yeah. And then we actually have one person who can beat Aisha, Josh Glandorf at UC San Diego Health.
Yeah.
He now is, as of Monday, I think, you're officially the CIO of UC San Diego Health, so not quite started in the role, but I will tell you this, he has been carrying Chris Longhurst for years. For years. So this is just like another day at the office. Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. So do yourself and all of these individuals a favor. Seek them out over the next day. Spend some time with them. Ask them tough questions. Or hide from them if that's your preference. But please do seek them out. We would love to get to know you all.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you all. And with that, I do encourage you again to stop by the UC Blog booth that is over in the vendor area. It's also a shameless plug to get you to the vendor area. I will say that, we call them vendors, but they really are sponsors and partners. And this is really a chance for you to have conversations with the people who are powering the IT in your organization. So I do really encourage you to spend some time in that room, wherever it was. It's set up really nicely, too. So I encourage you to do that. We will see you tonight for the UC Tech Awards at the Aquarium. It's going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll keep the awards ceremony short and tight and allow you to enjoy each other's company as well. And with that, I am turning it back over to you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that talk and also for jumping on at the last minute as you had to do. We really appreciate it very much so. So what sparks joy with me? Our next speaker. And actually hearing about the vendor room and sponsor room looking nice, that sparks joy too, because that was not easy. So thank you. So our keynote speaker, this is really to kick off the experience. This sparks joy for me because I was desperately hoping we were going to get this speaker, and we did, so I'm very thankful. Our theme this year, as you've heard me say many times, is 40 years of connections. So what that theme really spotlights is the work and contribution of all those 9,000 technologists who were mentioned earlier, everyone in this room sitting here with us today, everyone watching at home, at their own schools, or on their couches, or outside in the park, in our virtual sessions. And remember, everybody, presenters and audience alike, you are not the full audience of this conference. We are welcoming our virtuals as much as we possibly can. That's been extremely important to me. So all of you watching at home, thank you so much. And anyone catching and recording this later, they will be recorded. So it is really easy for all of us to get lost in the minutiae of our different individual schedules. So I want to think about how every action we take exists in an ecosystem that ripples and affects all of our colleagues, health professionals, faculty, students. And for me, one of the reasons I agreed to chair this event, possibly adverse to my own health, is that's a joke, by the way. These conferences serve to break a myopic view, I think, the navel gazing that was mentioned earlier. And we can, for this time, in this 2 days or 3 days, see each other. And when I say that, I mean the word, you're seen, what you do, like the different departments of IT. It's going through the presentations was really eye-opening because it's like, gosh, I only see ed tech. That's my piece. That's my baby. And to see so much that goes on to the mission is really eye-opening. So it made me think a couple of things. UCCSC, for anyone who doesn't know, stands for University of California Computing Services Conference. Computing Services Conference. That made me think, I came from the K-12 life. And as an educational technologist for San Diego Unified, my title was Microcomputer Applications Training Specialist. A total nonsense. A total nonsense title. Means nothing. It means nothing. And it makes me think, when I told people what I was, even if I just said I'm an educational technology trainer, the answer I would often get is, oh, so you teach teachers how to use computers. And I think that there's a misunderstanding of how technology has grown beyond that, how technology has now wrapped its way into every aspect of everything we do, in every small bit, every minute facet of how we communicate, how we get to know what's going on. And so that's what I really wanted this keynote to, why I wanted this keynote speaker. Language is critical to how we understand each other. And I do think about how sometimes we get wrapped up in misnomers or vague descriptions, and that ends up hurting us in the long run. And I'm personally thrilled to invite our keynote to the stage. Her name is Lara Boroditsky. She's a professor of cognitive science right here at our own home in UC San Diego. Her research is on the relationships between mind, the world, and language, as she puts it, or how humans get so smart. Her TED Talk on how language shapes thinking has been viewed more than 17 million times. Boroditsky has been named one of 25 visionaries changing the world by the Utne Reader, and is also a Searle Scholar, a McDonald Scholar, recipient of an NSF Career Award, and an APA Distinguished Science Lecturer. And I love this, so I kept it. She once used the Indonesian exclusive "we" correctly before breakfast and was proud of herself about it all day long. So now, without any further ado, welcome Lara Boroditsky to the stage.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'll be speaking to you using language because I can. This is one of these magical things that we humans can do. I can make sounds, so I'm making whistles and tones and puffs and hisses with my mouth while exhaling. And at least for some of you in this room, what's happening is that is creating a set of air vibrations, right? And those air vibrations are then reaching your eardrums, and your brain is taking that pattern of vibrations that is reaching your eardrums and turning that into thoughts, I hope. Right? That's happening. And with this method, this quite magical method, this oldest human technology, I can transmit thoughts into your mind, right? So I can implant a really weird idea in your mind right now. I could say, imagine a giraffe that is striped like a zebra and it's playing chess against a golden hedgehog, but they're both sitting on a pancake that's flying through space, right? Now, if everything has gone relatively well in your life so far, you haven't had that thought before, right? That's a new idea that you just put together. And I was able to do that by taking the little elements that we have in a shared language, putting them together in a new way, and having you construct that idea then in your mind. Now, of course, I said using our shared language. Well, there isn't just one language in the world. There are many languages spoken around the world. There are about 7,000 languages alive currently. And each language differs from the next in all kinds of ways. Of course, they have different sounds and they have different vocabularies, but also they differ in their structure and what their languages require or make possible to communicate easily. So let me give you an example. If I want to say something really simple, like, I live in the 7th blue house to the left of the big tree. These are all simple words in English, right? As soon as you try translating this to another language, you run into problems. So, for example, the 7th house. Well, some languages don't have words like 7, like literally just don't have number words. Some languages use completely different number systems that are in base 10. So translating even this simple number to another language would pose pose problems. Blue, the blue house. Well, some languages don't have a word like blue. Instead, they separate the blues into light and dark, or they make distinctions somewhere else in the color space, or they don't distinguish blue and green. So again, you wouldn't be able to directly translate this. To the left of the tree, well, some languages don't use words like left and right. Instead, they use north, south, east, and west, or other cardinal directions. And so, again, you wouldn't be able to give this direction. What about tree? Well, that's pretty vague for some languages. There's no such thing as a tree. It has to be a particular kind of tree, right? And so you'd have to specify, is it a cypress tree? Is it a Torrey pine? And so on. And just to give you a sense of the kinds of things that other languages think about or distinguish that maybe you've never thought about, here are some different stems for verbs of consumption in Navajo. Maybe just focus on the bottom for the different types of drinking. So there are different types of drinking depending on what kind of thing you're drinking out of. So drinking out of a bottle is a different stem of consumption than drinking out of a glass. Now, in some sense, I think you probably can kind of intuit with your mouth why those are different motions, but nonetheless, you've never thought to distinguish those things. Like if you're reporting an experience, oh, yesterday I drank some beer, you're not thinking, oh, did I drink it out of a bottle or out of a glass? But in Navajo, you would actually have to remember that in order to report your experience correctly. So languages can require their different speakers to pay attention to things that other languages simply do not pay attention to. And that begs the question, do the languages that we speak really shape the way that we think? Do they shape what we pay attention to, what we remember, how we reason about the world? People have been speculating about this question for thousands of years. So here's Charlemagne, Holy Roman Emperor. He says, to have a second language is to have a second soul. Very strong statement about the value of a language. Charles V, one of his successors, says, a man who knows 4 languages is worth 4 men. Again, a very, very strong statement. So, you know, if you speak multiple languages or if you can program in multiple languages, maybe you should go to your boss and say, hey, I should be paid 4 times as much. I'm worth 4 people. Frederick the Great of Prussia had a different, more specific set of hypotheses. He said, I speak English to my accountants, French to my ambassadors, Italian to my mistress, Latin to my God, and German to my horse. Quite puzzling why he came up with these particular set of assignations. But this is something that we've all heard before, right? So such and such language is great for romance, and this other language is great for reason or for argument or for war. All of those things that people say, like those general, like, oh, this is great for romance, there's no science behind any claims like that. It's just something that someone made up at some point. So the bad news is there's no language you can learn that will automatically make you a great lover or a great reasoner, right? But there are specific things that languages teach us to do, to pay attention to. And research over the last 20 or 30 years in my lab and other labs around the world has shown how powerfully language can shape thought across the spectrum of different cognitive abilities. So let me give you some of my favorite examples. I'll start with the domain of time. So the word time is actually the most frequent noun in English. Other temporal words like year, day are in the top 5 as well. This is true in a lot of languages. We humans are obsessed with time in a way. And it's a puzzling thing because we can't directly physically experience time. We can't see time, we can't smell time, we can't hear time, we can't feel it on our skin, right? We don't have a sensor, direct sensor for time. It's this abstract thing, yet you can't experience anything outside of time. It's the very fabric of your experience, right? So how do people come up with representations of time? How do people actually mentally represent this domain they clearly want to talk about a lot? Well, it turns out across the world, people use spatial representations to think about time, lay out time some way in space. But the way people lay out time and space differs a lot from culture to culture. For example, even the simplest thing, like which way your language is written, from left to right or right to left, makes a difference for how you organize time. So English speakers typically lay out time from left to right. Earlier events are on the left, later events are on the right. And so this kind of logo, this is from Nestle for a nutritional supplement for kids. It's very easy for you to read this logo and understand what it's trying to advertise. When they started marketing this product in Arabic-speaking countries, they ran into a problem, because if you read from right to left as in Arabic, and you look at this logo, well, it becomes quite puzzling what this product would do for your child. And in fact, it turns out in lots of experiments that people who read from left to right organize time left to right very automatically, intuitively, and people who read right to left organize time going in the other direction. Here's another big reversal. We used to think, it's natural in English to think that the future is ahead and the past is behind. We gesture this way. We say, oh, that was a long time ago, or you say, oh, that's in the future. And we also talk this way in English. We say, oh, the best is ahead of us, the worst is behind us, right? And people used to argue, well, this has to be the case. It's natural because we have eyes on the front of our heads, not on the backs of our heads, and we walk forwards usually, not backwards. So of course the future would have to be in front of us. Well, it turns out there are places around the world where people do exactly the opposite, both in their language and even in the way they move their bodies when they are thinking about time. So, and this is an example from Aymara. This is the language spoken in Bolivia. In Aymara, the past is in front, the future is behind. And here's a little still of this gentleman talking about the olden days, or the times gone by, and he gestures far in front of him. Now, why would they put the past in front? Well, they say it makes perfect sense. The past is manifest. You already know what happened. That's why you can see it. The future is unknown. That's why it's behind your head. And so time just has to flow over you and become manifest. And once it's the past, it's in front of your eyes. To them, it's the weirdest thing to think that you can see the future. Right? What hubris. You can't know what's there. Time also doesn't have to be laid out with respect to the body. So far I've given you examples where time goes left to right, right to left, front to back. But this is an Aboriginal community in Australia that I had a chance to work with. And they don't use words like left and right to organize space. So there are a lot of languages like this, actually. About a third of the world's languages rely mostly on some kind of cardinal direction or absolute direction. To speak a language like this, you have to stay oriented. So the way you say hello in Kuuk-Thaayorre is, you and I say, oh, how are you? Fine. They say, which way are you heading? And the answer should be something like north-northwest in the far distance. How about you? So imagine as you're walking around this conference, each person you say hi to, you have to report your heading direction. At first, it would be really hard, right? Because so let's do a test, a very quick test right now. Everyone close your eyes. And now point southeast. Okay, you can open your eyes. Okay, I see points in every direction. I don't know which way it is myself, but you guys have not been a lot of help. Now, don't feel bad. This is completely normal for very, very smart, educated humans in North America, all around Europe. You ask a group of people to point, especially if you're inside, in an unfamiliar, in a new place, people will point in every possible direction, right? There are communities like this Kuuk-Thaayorre community in Australia where I could ask a 5-year-old, can you point southeast? And they would point immediately and without hesitation, right? And I would have to take my compass out and check just because I don't trust myself that I can mark that they're correct. So these are languages that require people to stay oriented all the time in order to speak the language. In fact, these people stay oriented better than we used to think humans could. because when we talked about humans, we were really talking about North American college students, which are the ones that psychologists like me test in our laboratories because they're just very conveniently located. I mean, they're right here, right? And so we used to believe that humans couldn't do this kind of orientation. We always had some biological excuse for it. Like we'd say, oh, sure, salmon can do it, but they have magnets in their scales, or birds can do it, but they have magnets in their beaks, or ants can do it in Tunisia, but they have the special surface on their backs that allows them to tell the angle of incident light from celestial bodies, and we just don't have those biological advantages. Well, it turns out humans can do this kind of orienting. It's not even that hard, it turns out. It just takes a little bit of practice. And so to me, it's this is a wonderful example of something that we used to think was beyond human capacity, beyond human cognition, and we just hadn't thought to try, right? It was possible, it was there all along. We just hadn't thought to try. Okay, so these folks organize space relative to cardinal directions. How do they think about time, right? So here's an example of a task I would bring to this community. I take pictures that imply a temporal progression. These happen to be pictures of my grandfather at different ages. I take these pictures, I put them in a stack, I shuffle them, and I hand them to the person and say, can you just lay these out in the correct order? So what the person thinks they're doing is just figuring out the order, but what I'm interested in is how will they put this order out in space? And the way that I've placed it here is from left to right, the way that an American English speaker would naturally do it. Well, the Kuuk Thaayorre don't talk about left and right, so what do? Here's some data. Here's one person who's organized a bunch of different card sets. They're sitting facing south, and all the card sets are organized from left to right. Here's same person on a different day. Now they're sitting facing north, and now they've organized everything from right to left. Here's another person. They're sitting facing east, and now they've organized everything coming towards the body. What's the pattern? I'm hearing little, the east to west, east is the sun, right? It's, in this case, the order is always going from east to west, the direction of motion of the sun. Right? And to me, this is incredible because I like to point out there are two different ways of thinking about these data. One way of describing it is to say, how weird, time turns for them every time they turn their body, right? They organize time in a different direction depending on which way they're facing. But another way to describe these data is exactly the opposite, is to say, wow, for them, time always goes in the same direction, always from east to west. And it's we who make time turn, right? So if I'm facing this way, then time goes this way. If I'm facing this way, then time goes this way. If I'm facing this way, time goes this way. How egocentric of me to make the dimension of time change every time I turn my body, right? For them, time always goes the same direction on the landscape, regardless of which way they happen to be facing. Okay. Turns out time doesn't even have to go in a straight line. So this is some work by Rafael Nunez and his colleagues here at UCSD. This is a community in Papua New Guinea. And for the Yupno people, time flows into the village at one angle. Then once it hits the village, it takes a turn and flows out of the village at a different angle. And these directions have to do with the location of the mouth and the source of the Yupno River, which is very important for them. And so another example of how we used to think time had to go in a straight line, turns out it does not. There are other relevant things that can organize time for you. Okay, here's another smart human trick that language carries for us. If I were to ask you, how many penguins are here? I bet I can tell at least partially what you would do to find out is at least a lot of you did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? You counted. So what did you do? What does counting mean? Well, you have a count list that's memorized from childhood that was drilled into you by your parents. You know these number words in order. And you know that if you name each one with a number, the last word that you said is the number in the list, right? That's a really simple little trick that we were all taught as children, a way of knowing exactly how many there are of something, is to go down your count list, name each one with a successive number, and the last word that you said is the number. Well, a lot of people around the world don't do this. They don't have exact number words in their language, and so they wouldn't have a way of answering this question. And also, a lot of different number systems exist that aren't the base 10 kind of systems that we use. So here, for example, is a number system from Papua New Guinea. It's a base 27 system. In this language, number words correspond to different parts of the body. So the names for the parts of the body are the names for the numbers. And there are a lot of systems like this. Of course, we also have a somewhat finger-based, body-based system, right? So base 10 is very good because we have 10 fingers and things like that. But for them, it's a base 27 system. And so the word for 8, for example, is elbow. So if you want 8 potatoes, you want elbow potatoes. The biggest number system, the biggest base number system that I know is base 81. That's gets quite cumbersome. And then the smallest, that's a productive system, is a binary system, base 2. Also gets very cumbersome when you want to start naming numbers larger than 4. So languages have a great amount of variety in what kinds of number systems they have and whether or not they even have a number system. Here's an example from a community in Brazil. These are the Piraha. And the Piraha don't have exact number words at all. So they have words that mean something like few or relatively fewer and words like many, but they don't have words like 7 that can pick out exactly 7 things. And researchers have tested the Piraha in many different tasks. Here's a simple task. I lay out a certain number of spools of thread, and I ask you to lay out the same number of balloons. And what you see is the Piraha can be precise up to about 3 or 4, and then after that, they start approximating. And we know they're approximating because their error around their estimates increases as the number to be estimated increases. If you're doing exact enumeration, if you're counting, you wouldn't have that kind of increase in error. Now, of course, it's always a problem when you say, okay, look, there are these people who live in a small community in the Amazon, and they do something differently from the way that, MIT students do it. Of course, right? There's so many things that are different between these communities. What's interesting is to look at people who live in a very modern numerate society but don't have access to number words specifically. And the way researchers are able to find these people is by looking at home signers, people who are born deaf but are not exposed to an organized sign language. And so in their communicative repertoire, there aren't exact number words, even though they live in a community that is otherwise very numerate. So for example, this is a home signer in Nicaragua, and this is a kind of normal street scene where they live, right? So they live in this very numerate society. They ride the bus, they use money. Their people in their family do all the normal things that people in a modern numerate society do. And yet, when home signers like this are tested, they can only do very approximate estimation of numbers. They don't count. And the thing is, they know they're missing something, right? They're frustrated with themselves. They know that when they go to give money to a clerk, that person knows something that they don't know, and somehow they know how to give a certain amount of money back. But it's just beyond, it's just frustratingly beyond their understanding. And the way I think about this for myself is I have lots of talented musical friends, and I don't understand anything about music at all. And I will hear them sometimes improvise over a piece of music or sing over something in a way that just sounds wonderful, and I have no idea how they're doing that. To me, it's just a complete blank in their mind. I know that they're doing it, but I just don't know how. And that's the way that I think about this example. Okay, a fun project for you, or maybe something to take to your kids. Here's a puzzle. This is the number system in a real language that is spoken in the world today. So those are the names of the numbers. And your job is to figure out what these number words in the middle mean and how you would say those numbers. It's a tough puzzle. You'll need a pencil and some time. So, but I recommend trying it. It's really fun. I'll put it up at the end as well. Okay, languages also differ in how they divide up the basic perceptual world. So for example, the world of colors, right? So there's this continuous spectrum of colors. Languages create categories. Some languages have lots of words for colors. Some have only a couple of words like light and dark. And where languages place boundaries between colors differs. So I'll give you a small example. This is a difference between English and Russian. So in Russian, there's not a single word that can cover all of the colors that English calls blue. Instead, there's an obligatory distinction between light blues, голубой, and dark blues, синий, right? So Russian speakers have a lifetime of experience distinguishing between colors that fall on one side or the other of this light blue, dark blue distinction that they have to make, right? Of course, we can distinguish light blue and dark blue in English as well, and we have lots of other blues, but it's not required. If you can just call all of these blue, right? But in Russian, that's not an option. You have to make a distinction. And what we find in studies, both across this distinction and lots of others that exist across languages, is people are faster, more accurate to make a distinction between two shades that fall on different sides of a language boundary, right? So if your language requires you to call two colors by different names, you're going to be better at actually perceptually distinguishing those two colors than if your language doesn't make a distinction. Well, that tells us that language is getting in even into these very, very basic perceptual decisions, right? Telling the difference between two patches of blue, that's not a very complex task, right? Like, if you were a pigeon, you could do that task, right? You don't have to be very smart. And yet, even in these very basic nuts and bolts of perception, language is getting in there and tweaking things a little bit very, very early on in the cognitive process. Here's another example of a category that language creates that doesn't correspond to something in the world. So a lot of languages have what's called grammatical gender. So for example, in Spanish, all nouns are either masculine or feminine, right? And these genders differ across languages. So for example, the sun is feminine in German, masculine in Spanish. For the moon, it's the reverse. Do these genders actually matter for how people think about objects, right? Do German speakers actually think of the moon as being somehow more feminine, and Spanish speakers think of it as the sun being somehow more feminine, and Spanish speakers think of it as more masculine? What would that mean? Now, if you've had to learn, who here speaks a language with grammatical gender? If you've had to learn a language with grammatical gender as a second language, you know how frustrating this is, right? Mark Twain wrote an essay about his experience learning German. It is mostly about the grammatical gender system, and the title of the essay is The Awful German Language. David Sedaris writes about learning French, and he says at some point he just became so frustrated with the French gender system that he decided to only ever talk about things in the plural, because then you don't have to mark gender. And so that means he can only ever buy 2 toasters and 2 loaves of bread, never just one, because then he would be exposed as someone who doesn't actually know the gender system. So as a second language learner, of course, it's very, very frustrating. What effect does it have when you either grow up with this kind of system or learn it? Well, it turns out people who speak language with grammatical gender actually give some kinds of stereotypically masculine or feminine properties to the things that are named by these genders. So even little kids, for example, who are growing up speaking French or Spanish, if you tell them, oh, we're making a little animated film and we're going to have these characters, can you tell us what voice we should give to this alarm clock, to this toaster? The voices they choose for these inanimate objects have to do with grammatical gender. They'll give it a boy voice if it's masculine in their language, a girl voice if it's feminine in their language. You can see this with adults as well. So, for example, in my lab, we did a an examination of art objects generated by European painters and sculptors for over hundreds of years. And we asked when an artist is creating a personification. Here's a sculpture of time, a sculpture of justice, and so on. Does the grammatical gender in the artist's native language predict the gender of the personification, the body that's used? It turns out 78% of the time you can predict the gender of the personification from the language, right? Here's this little quirk of grammar that's literally getting carved in stone. So here are examples from Michelangelo's different times of day. You have the feminine dawn, the masculine day, the masculine dusk, and the feminine night. And all of these are in accordance with grammatical gender in Italian. Language also affects us in important decisions like blame and punishment, examples that might involve eyewitness testimony in a court setting, for example. And importantly, language affects us even when we can see the event with our own eyes, even when we can, quote unquote, go to the tape, right? So we have this expression in English, let's go to the tape. And what that means is we think we can believe our eyes. We think that if we can just look at the video, we will then perceive reality directly, right? And then because we have seen the tape, we've gone to the tape, we can now all agree that something happened or didn't happen or happened a particular way. But in fact, even when we can go to the tape, our experience of that event, what we see in the tape, can be affected by lots of things, including language. So we wanted to study how our perception of accidents can be affected by language. And we did this study a little while ago. At that time, the most famous accident incident that had happened was the original wardrobe malfunction. So this is when Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake performed at the Super Bowl. And in the last dance move, he reached across her chest and either he tore the costume or the costume tore. And for 9/16 of a second, her breast was partially exposed on national television, and this created a huge uproar. People were so upset by this, it became the most TiVoed event of all time at that time. The FCC attempted to fine CBS $550,000 for the indecency. It was a huge uproar. And so we knew that all our participants had seen the event, some of them many times. And so that allowed us to test, okay, here's a saturated event. People have seen it, they've talked about it, there's endless news coverage. What if we just described it one way or another? Would it change how they perceive the event, right? Even though they've had all this information about it already, and we can show them the video. So we gave people one of two descriptions. It all started out the same. So we said Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson performed during the Super Bowl. Toward the end of the song, Timberlake followed Jackson across the stage, stood beside her. As they sang the last line, Timberlake reached across the front of Jackson's body and, in one version, they got, in this final dance move, a snap unfastened and a part of the bodice tore. The cover slid right off of Jackson's chest. The other version, the other half the people got a different version. In this final dance move, he unfastened a snap and tore part of the bodice. He slid the cover right off of Jackson's chest. So just those little forms, whether he is the agent of the action, change. Everything else is the same. And everyone has seen the video. Some people we showed the video before we gave them a description. Some people we showed the video after the description. All of them had already seen the video. Well, what happens? People in this condition, people who got the agentive language, ask for 53% more in fines from Timberlake. So we ask how much of the $550,000 should he pay? They want a lot more from him if they get this agentive language. They think he's more to blame if they get this agentive language. So here's an example of something that you can see with your own eyes, already have a lot of thoughts and information about, and yet just framing it a particular way in the moment has a big impact on how people perceive it and judge blame and apportion punishment. Now, language is this way of funneling our attention, right? Because we're bombarded by so much information. It's much more than our brain can possibly process. And what language does is tells us what is most important for our own cultural context to attend, right? The things that you will have to include in your descriptions, those are at the minimum the things that you have to encode. So language forms habits of encoding, remembering experience. Of course, you can remember and encode things that are outside of the things you talk about, but at the minimum, you have to remember the things that you have to talk about, right? And of course, the things that you then attend to encode, remember, those form the basis for all your future decisions and all the future things that you attend to. They create the knowledge base from which you're operating. So language is constantly guiding us in this way. So I've given you a few examples of how language shapes the way we think. There's some big differences where time, for example, can flow in completely different directions or independent coordinate frames, depending on the language and culture you find yourself in. There are really deep differences where, for example, a language can give you entrance into counting, which is the very first step to the world of mathematics, which, if you look around this room or think about anything that you do in your job, what would be possible without mathematics, right? And yet here is evidence that language is a very necessary ingredient to be able to spread this idea of counting and mathematics, even to get into that world, even to walk through that door. Language can have really early effects in our perceptual system, guiding how we make even really basic decisions, like between light and dark blue. Language can have really broad consequences. So I gave you this kind of silly example of grammatical gender. And it's this funny little quirk of grammar, but it's affecting how you think about things that can be named by a noun. Well, what can be named by a noun? Most things, right? It's an incredibly broad scope of influence. And I also gave you an example of how language can play a role in some weighty decisions about blame and punishment, for example. Now, outside of labs like mine and in the real world, people already have, for a long time, have believed that what you call something is important, right? Companies pay consultants lots of money to decide what to name their product. Politicians pay consultants to figure out how to frame their message. And what we call things has real consequences, right? So the same group of people can be referred to as patriots or activists or terrorists, depending on your perspective. And then the way you treat those people and act towards them could be drastically different. The same group of people could be called migrants, aliens, asylum seekers, illegals. Again, the treatment for these people becomes very different depending on the linguistic framing. Or does the U.S. government sponsor torture or just enhanced interrogation techniques? Did Bill and Monica have sex? The last set of impeachment scandals rested on the definition of this word. Or is ketchup a vegetable? At some point, the U.S. Congress voted that ketchup is in fact a vegetable because they didn't want to have to provide any further vegetables in school lunches, and ketchup was already available with fries. And so, by definition, ketchup became a vegetable, right? These are the kinds of things that come up all the time. If you start paying attention, there's constantly a legal ruling about whether a burrito is a sandwich or whether rabbits are poultry. I mean, there are all kinds of things that happen like this because these names, these frames really matter for how we deal with things in the world. Here's a California example. A few years ago, the California Prune Growers Association asked the FDA to allow them to change the name of their product from prunes to dried plums. Now, they had to pay millions of dollars for this change. Why would they want to do this? Well, if you think about it for a second, you understand prunes, the word prune. What are the linguistic neighbors of prunes? It's all bad things, right? It's old age, constipation, wrinkles. Right? It's not things that healthy young Californians want to think about when they're shopping for snacks. Dried plums, on the other hand, prunes are dried plums, just so we're clear. Dried plums, on the other hand, don't have this problem. They have great linguistic neighbors. What are the neighbors of dried plums? Well, I don't know, dried apricots, dried kiwis, dried mangoes, dried apple, trail mix, right? They're things that you take on a hike. So of course, dried plums, more attractive. And it turns out they gambled on this, and dried plums do sell better than prunes. Californians want to buy dried plums. After a few years, they figured out that older people wanted the prunes. So now you can buy prunes and dried plums in the same packaging side by side. Now, languages and cultures make us super smart. There are all these structures and ideas built into languages that have been developed over thousands of years by people before us. Take the number system, for example, right? That's something that you learn as a kid, take completely for granted later on in life. But yet this was intellectual work that took thousands of years to develop. And now we kind of get it for free as part of the language. But languages and cultures, or in fact any structures that we participate in, also decrease cognitive entropy. What I mean by that is there are often many ways that you can think about a problem, or many ways that you can conceptualize a complex space. But we tend to do it only the way that we're used to, the way that our language tells us to, the way that our culture tells us to, the way that the process that we have in the office tells us to. And we don't think to look outside of the trench that we're in and see, well, maybe I could do this differently. And so for me, looking across languages, looking across cultures is always such a wonderful reminder of how much more our brains can do. How, human brains didn't invent just one language. We invented 7,000 different conceptual universes. And languages are living things. They're tools that we shape to suit our needs, right? So we shouldn't be the slaves of them. Instead, we're the masters of them, right? We are constantly creating new ways of talking to suit the new ideas that we want to propagate. So just a reminder that you're in possession of this incredible living thing, and you can always ask yourself, well, what thoughts do I wish to create? What thoughts do I wish to share with other people? And then create those structures, whether it's in language or in whatever processes you use in your work. Now, that was all very lofty, right? But sometimes when people try to change language or rename something, it doesn't work. It sounds downright ridiculous, right? So here, a few years ago, the U.S. Energy Department rebranded fossil fuels as molecules of freedom. And then we were going to be exporting freedom gas to other places. That obviously did not catch on. I think you can tell why. Older example, U.S. Congress renamed French fries into freedom fries. This was because France wouldn't join our coalition of the willing to go into Iraq. So we punished them. Obviously, that was very effective. It also applied to freedom toast by decree. Now, this is not a new kind of silly situation. So during World War I, everything that had a German-sounding name got renamed. So we had Liberty Cabbage and Liberty Sausage and Liberty Pups and so on. Now, the reason these kinds of substitutions don't work is they're fundamentally logically flawed. Generally, in language, if two words are completely interchangeable, it means they're synonyms. So think about postman and mailman. If you can really use two words in exactly the same context without losing anything or adding anything, they're synonyms. And the closer the set of contexts that words can be used in, the closer they are in meaning. So if you just make this kind of substitution with nothing else in mind, okay, French fries become freedom fries, French toast is freedom toast, French poodles are now freedom poodles, and then freedom kissing and freedom manicures. But what should we call France? Freedom land? And what should we call French? The language of freedom? No, you start out thinking, oh, I'm saying that France and freedom are somehow antithetical, but in fact, just making this substitution implies that they're synonymous, right? Implies that France and freedom are the same thing. So if we understand the mechanisms by which language and thought interact, even these silly nationalistic projects can be improved. So if Americans really want to annoy the French, I suggest we take things that the French dislike and call them French. So Ketchup will be French sauce. McDonald's will be the French cafe. Monogamy will be the French relationship. Disneyland will be called France. Americans will be called French people. English language will be called French, and so on. Thank you very much.
Did you take a picture of that?
I did, yes. I'll send it to you.
We are actually a little bit early. If anyone has any questions, we can take one or two. I have one myself.
Okay.
All right. So I lived in Greece in 2007, and one thing that really shook me was when people said no, they nodded. I had always assumed that an affirmative nod was just inherent to being human, and that broke that. Is there anything in language that is all 100% learned, or is there anything that's inherent to?
What a great question. Yeah, a lot of things that we assume must be universal are not. So any purported universal that has been tried, you can find counterexamples. There are some things that have to be common to all languages, like all natural human languages must be learnable by humans. Right? So there's something inherent to all of those structures that must be learnable by humans. They all should allow humans to continue to exist and, you know, not be so complicated that people die early. You know, they're like, they all have to be processable by normal human brains. They can't exceed limits of working memory. Obviously, there are lots of limits to human cognition. So there are basic structural constraints on language, but any specific thing that you can postulate about a language, that people have postulated about languages. Someone somewhere said, no, the language that I'm working on here doesn't satisfy that.
Are there any optical illusions which are less effective in various linguistic communities?
That's a wonderful question. So across cultures, you do find people's responses to two-dimensional images, for example, are different because we have different amounts of experience with two-dimensional images. So there's this one example of what are called Mooney images. So you take a photograph and you reduce it down to black and white, just two-tone. And often it's hard to tell what's going on in the two-tone. And then if you bring back some of the gradient information, you see, oh, that's a Dalmatian in a forest. Then when you get it back down to two-tone, you can still see the Dalmatian. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That's the way it works for American college students who have seen lots and lots of two-dimensional images. If you take that to the Pirahã, for example, in this Amazonian community in Brazil, they can see the rich image and they can see the two-tone image, but they don't understand what the relationship is between them. They're just like, those are just two different images, right? And so, and part of that is just having experience of dealing with two-dimensional images. That's not part of their normal life. They don't create images like that, and so that takes time to learn.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your talk. One question that I had in mind is how would you, how were the studies based on if I'm translating a sentence in my head versus if I'm thinking the thought in two different languages? How would the language be different?
Yeah, so you're asking a wonderful question about bilingualism. Of course, most people in the world are bilingual if they're not native English speakers. There's often this question of, when you're bilingual, do you have basically two separate minds, one for each language? Or is it one fully integrated mind where both languages are fully mixed together? And the answer is kind of neither of those and both of those at the same time. So here's what I mean. Bilinguals never seem to completely turn off their other language. So other languages that you speak, whether it's one or lots of other languages, are always at least somewhat active. And it depends a little bit, the degree depends on how fresh that language is, how conducive the context is to that language, how fluent you are in that language. But it's always at least bubbling in there a little bit. But the context that you're in, the linguistic context you're in, also guides you. So if you're if I'm speaking Russian, it's my first language, so I'm speaking Russian, I will behave more like a Russian speaker than if I'm speaking English, but I'm never like a monolingual of either language. I'm always something in between, and it kind of shifts between one way or another.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You spoke about how ways that adding words to our language didn't work
Mm-hmm.
to expand the way that we think about things. Can you give some examples or talk about how that can work?
Oh, sure. I mean, we're adding new expressions or new words all the time. So let me give you a recent example, Me Too, right? So the hashtag Me Too helped unify a whole lot of experiences that people used to think of as disparate experiences or one-off cases. And the fact that there was this one label created this general class that couldn't be dismissed based on these kind of individual one-off cases. But it also, whenever you create a category like that, it acts like a category. Categories are good in that they're unifying and they allow you to see commonalities across disparate cases, but they're also tricky in that they imply equivalence across lots of things, right? So in the Me Too hashtag, there are some things that are really horrible, heinous crimes, and there's some things that are mild inconveniences, and so then the fact that we call all of them Me Too events becomes problematic in some cases because you're creating a false equivalence between lots of very, very different things. And then once you have a label like that, you can start questionable verbing, like people say, oh, he got Me Too'd, right? Where like it's something that happened to that person as opposed to something that maybe was the result of their own actions. So you can see whenever there's a new term that really takes off in the culture, there's a reason that it takes off, and it's because it helps us organize information in a different way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you think emojis are changing?
I think emojis are just another channel, right? They're just another set of communicative signals. I think the reason that they are so helpful is that they add information that is otherwise hard to express in the communication channel that they're used in, which is texting, right? So texting doesn't have all of the stuff you have in face-to-face communication, your facial expression, your tone of voice. You can tell by someone's posture what mood they're in, and you are missing all of that in texting. And so emojis are adding that information. But also sometimes they're adding information that isn't about mood, but just like extra information that you wouldn't necessarily have. So for example, if, I don't know, if I've had a pleasant conversation with someone, but now I'm done talking to them over text, I'll just send them a pineapple. And it's like my pineapple of goodwill. Like, I don't want to talk anymore, but here's a pineapple, right? And people who text with me know that that's what that means. Like, okay, I'm happy, but I'm done. Like, we're not talking anymore. Generational fragmentation is something that every generation has complained about and been concerned about. Basically, for the last, you can find texts from 2,000 years ago that are saying teenagers are destroying the language and soon there will be no more language left, right? So every generation worries about this. Languages, of course, are always changing, and so linguists say you'll know that language has stopped changing when you can understand your teenage daughter talking on the phone with her friends, because that's just a natural course of language. There are always new terms, new slang, new formats of interaction being added. That's how it's always been. Yes.
Sorry, thank you for your speech. I think IT folks sometimes have their own language, their own world, their own culture, that sort of thing, and folks outside the IT world kind of maybe have this view of I could never, right? You sort of mentioned that. so I'm sort of, my question sort of comes to what is the call to action, right? Is it immersion in a sense, where we should find somebody who doesn't speak that our language, what have you? Is it bringing somebody who can sort of spot check us and tell us what we don't know as we're going through it, right? I think a lot of the folks are being asked to build, design, test things for other people, but if we don't speak the same language, to your point, right, we might inadvertently create something that didn't align with what their expectations were.
Yeah. So whenever people speak different languages, there's, whether it's literally different human languages or different languages in terms of technical versus not technical, there's a lot of opportunity for miscommunication. Even if we speak the same language, there's still plenty of opportunity for miscommunication. And I would say that those are all opportunities to improve everyone's thinking about the topic. No matter how much of an expert you are on some topic, you don't know everything about it. It's like the space is just way more complex than any one person can understand. And dealing with another person who is misunderstanding or miscommunicating helps sharpen your own thinking about it as well. So I would take those misunderstandings as opportunities to enrich your own understanding and to broaden. And so whenever, I know it's inconvenient to have miscommunications, but I think of having all of these different languages and different experiences as a source of richness, right? They are enlarging your own view and helping you understand how that person sees it. And the only way to get that understanding is to listen. And I know that's a very ironic bit of advice for someone who's just been standing here talking for the last hour, but that's the most important part of communication, is to really listen to the other parties, to try to understand where they are so you can meet them where they are.
Hi, I'm wondering if you could tell us what research into language, similar to numbers and times and different descriptions in different languages, what that tells us about the human senses, what we typically think of as the 5 senses, but I've read that there's a different number in different languages and cultures.
Yeah, so there's some really nice work on language and sensory experience. I gave you some examples from color perception, but there's also a work on language and smell. So in languages like English, we don't have a very good dedicated smell vocabulary. So if you just think of words for smells in particular that aren't just names of things like banana, right? But like actually a name of a smell that isn't also the name of something else. We don't have a lot, like smelly, pungent. You know, there aren't that many dedicated smell words. Other languages have more developed smell vocabularies, and actually speakers of those languages are better able to distinguish certain kinds of smells and remember smells and agree on whether or not things smell similar or not. So it's another example of language being able to organize complex information into categories that you can then use for other things that you want. So whichever domain you choose, whether it's sound, I mean, sound is an obvious one because languages have different sounds, and so there are very clear examples of speakers of certain languages not being able to make a distinction between sounds that are meaningfully different in another language but not meaningfully different in their language. So for example, in Japanese, R and L are not meaningfully distinguished, and it's very hard for adult Japanese speakers to hear the difference between R and L. They just sound like they're part of one larger sound family. Whereas of course in English, those are importantly different sounds, and so it's almost unimaginable to think, how could you not hear this distinction? But English doesn't make lots of distinctions that other languages do, and when you try to teach an English speaker those distinctions, they're like, you just said the same sound 12 times, I don't know. Yes?
So I'm thinking about this from like the access to and diversity lens. How does your work inform how we think about standardized testing?
Thank you for that question. I mean, yeah, the question is, what is standardized testing for? In designing some of the experiments that I take with me to the field, to other communities, I sometimes have to look at materials used in standardized tests because, you know, there's this kind of idea of, oh, well, if you look at an IQ test, for example, those are non-linguistic. There's a lot of non-linguistic, culture-free tests in there that you can really use in lots of cultures. And I have never been able to use a single example from those tests, because as soon as I look at the pictures, I'm like, well, these make no sense in the culture that I'm going to. And of course, they wouldn't be able to do this because they don't have laundromats, or whatever it is. And so just from my point of view as a researcher, it's completely unbelievable to me that any of these tests measure something that is culture free or measure something that can really be used as any kind of measure of someone's potential, right? So there's that. As part of a large society that values efficiency, there is a desire to have something that allows you to bin people, streamline them into different forms of education. And so I think that's why those tools persist. But I don't think they're really useful assessments of someone's potential. And I think definitely rethinking the experiences that people have had and tailoring education specifically to those sets of experiences is the way that we would allow people to achieve their full potential.
Hi, I had a question about sounds and the relationship between a sound and its meaning. And I had wondering, in your research, did you notice, for example, like a grunt or a scoff, did that, there's a definition in our language, and when we hear that, we know what that person is kind of trying to communicate. Are there languages where it's not the same? A grunt is a good thing or a bad thing or things like that?
Yeah, so there are definitely a lot of differences in how humans express pleasure or displeasure with something. There are some really basic similarities that researchers looking at lots and lots of languages have been able to extract for basic words, that there certain kinds of vowels, like open vowels, tend to be more for these things, closed vowels tend to be more for those things. But these are kind of small correlations that kind of run across languages, but then there can also be huge variation across it. I think I would always be careful when thinking about trying to guess what another person must mean, because people will report, for example, oh, when I hear people speaking Chinese or Vietnamese, it sounds like they're angry, and it sounds very emotional, right? And they're like, why are they fighting? Well, those are just tonal languages where you modulate pitch to change the meaning of the word. And so you have to go up and down in pitch when you're speaking those languages as part of the language. And to an English speaker's ear, it sounds like they're angry when, in fact, they're just using their language. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned that many people in the world are bilingual, and that we are uniquely not often, and that sounds like a bad thing to me. Can you explain, like, what price are we paying for that, like, as a society? I know that's kind of a big question, but just by us having that limited perspective, what is it costing?
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, there are economists that have computed this for some places, like for the UK. What does it cost that people can't speak other languages, for example, for the tourist economy, for trade, and so on? And the numbers are very big, but I tend to think of it more in terms of the opportunity to expand your perspective and to be broader in your view and be more flexible, and have a richer mental life. And I would say also that, language isn't the only way to do that, right? It's just one of the many ways. You could go live in a different place, and that will also expand your view. You could learn a new skill, or join a community of people who sail or people who ride horses, and that will also expand your view. So there are lots and lots of ways to reach beyond whatever world you live in already, and language is just one of those things. And I say that because really learning another language is a huge amount of work. It's not easy. And so I say most people in the world are bilingual. That's true. They're actually multilingual. They're more than bilingual. But if you don't grow up in a multilingual environment, it's a big ask for someone to say, okay, go and just go and learn fluently another language. It's a lot of work. But there are lots and lots of other ways of kind of reaching beyond your current state. Yes. Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Hi, I was just really curious in reading your bio. You said that you used the Indonesian exclusive we before breakfast, and we're extremely proud of it. So I'm curious what that was.
Yeah, so Indonesian has a distinction between we as in all of us in the conversation, whereas we as opposed to we as in, say, the people that I came with, but not you. And so, you know, when you're making plans, you're saying, okay, are we going to dinner? In Indonesian, you would be specific about whether you're actually inviting this other person to dinner, or or whether you're just saying, okay, are you letting us now leave so we can go to dinner? And so that's a distinction that takes a while for me to get used to when I start speaking Indonesian. And like one morning, I got it right before breakfast, and then I was just like the smartest person I'd ever met all day long.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I found it really interesting. My spouse is Japanese and grew up in Japan. I grew up here in America. And they came here to study, and now we're married. And so what I found out currently in our relationship, we're really good at sounding competent in the other language. So if I'm speaking Japanese, I can fool the grandparents. And Yui is actually very good, Yui is my spouse, is very good at speaking. Like, you wouldn't be able to tell she didn't grow up here, I would think. But being a couple, we're actually really not good at expressing the meaning. So we sound competent even amongst each other, and yet we are constantly faltering on expressing the true meaning. And so I don't know if you have any insights for couples joining these cultures.
There's a wonderful quote by George Bernard Shaw that I love. He says the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I think that's an experience that a lot of people in long relationships or in collaborations, working collaborations, also have, where you say, "But we agreed on this," and then 20 years later, you're like, "Oh, but you didn't mean when you said it's the oh." So the advice that the only advice one can ever give about improving communication is to really listen and to spend time there, to really spend time trying to understand what that person means. Try to say back to the person what it is that you think that they said, and see if that sounds right to them. Ask them to say back to you the things that they think you've communicated. All of us have this experience of, but I said so clearly, and then somehow it doesn't seem to translate. Professors have this all the time because we know we've given perfect lectures that very clearly explain the material, and then somehow in the exam we get all this stuff back from students, and you're just like, where did you get this idea? And it's because we talk and we don't listen, right? And so increasing the amount of listening that you do and the amount of actually actively interacting around, do you mean this and that? And not being scared of the fact that there's disagreement, really learning to embrace it as an opportunity to learn more.
I think we'll cut it off there.
Thank you so much.
We could have kept going forever. You see why I wanted her? Thank you so much. That was fantastic. It's jaw-dropping to me, some of these concepts. And as it was put earlier, the basic fundamental technology that we use, it's wonderful. So we're about to actually break out. You're going to have a couple of extra minutes. The first set of sessions will begin at 11 a.m. As you go to check out the amazing sessions we have volunteers stationed all over the place to help you to find rooms, and including the vendor room where you can check out those vendors and put those raffle tickets in and make some new friends. At around noon, lunch will be served outside on the Matthews Quad. Hopefully you saw the wonderful setup we have there. I can't wait to go there myself. Honestly, those vendors that are going to help you, the volunteers that are going to help you, the volunteers and the committee members worked insanely hard these last few months to make this happen in a shortened amount of time, frankly. And so I want to really thank our committee and our volunteers for being here and for all of the extra hours that we put in. So thank you to them. And now it's time to break out. Enjoy the 40th UC Tech Conference. I'll be around if you want to chat. Enjoy.